Welcome to Momversations with the Win-Win Women platform. We are so blessed to have this opportunity to gather and care, connect, and collaborate with fellow women. I'm Regan Barnes, and today I am not hosting a Momversation. Instead, I'm going to do a monologue, and I happen to have a son named Ted. So, this is actually the mother of Ted Talks. I will be exploring the vision of Momivate, what it is that has inspired me to create this nonprofit organization and put effort into bringing back the joy of motherhood. Because if it's not a desirable profession, then fewer and fewer women will choose to engage in it and bring their skills and their hobbies and their talents into their homes. So, moms, this is basically an invitation to take back control. I want you to accept the fact that the hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. We have abdicated our power by thinking it's more fun to go pursue a career. We are sold on a vision that going to work is how we would contribute to society. And as a whole, society has been experimenting with this. And mothers did leave the home in order to contribute to society. But in the midst of that, society began to crumble all around us. The fact is, there's so much more to motherhood, but it's disguised behind the mundane things that we so often associate with motherhood. Chores, for instance. But we need to really look closely and come to recognize that when you pull moms away from the chores and the mundane things, we're also being pulled away from the kind of intangible things. And I have no interest in going backwards, just to be clear. I am as reluctant as anybody to look decades ago and try to convince ourselves that things were better back then. They weren't, and that's why we fought. And we fought some beautiful, admirable battles in order to increase our rights and our opportunities as women. We can't and we don't want to go back in time. And so I invite us to start thinking creatively and revolutionize motherhood into something that we still want to do because it is a biological necessity, right? To stay with our children. Who knows why our species takes 18 years or so to grow those babies out of the nest. But that's just how it is. And so we need to take responsibility for that and be committed to that. One problem that we see just as basically an epidemic these days is mental illness. I feel so strongly that many mental illnesses, not all, but many, could be prevented by some simple and consistent long-term measures that are best started in childhood. An example I like to bring up is bedtime routine. Yes, our children fight bedtime routines. This is like a simple illustration of one of the great paradoxes of life. So often we fight what is ultimately good for us. As moms, we have to take that on and be willing to keep up the fight and give our children consistent day in and day out for those first 18 years of their lives. And it will have an impact. Now, those children will grow up and experiment and not keep their bedtimes for the first maybe 6 or 8 years of adulthood, right? Now you know that because you did it and I did it. We thought that sleep was expendable. We didn't understand why our mothers had been pushing us to do those bedtime routines. However, that is a good example because there are physical repercussions that come from not keeping those routines. And as long as we are able to connect the dots and notice, oh, I'm a grumpier person and harder to get along with because I don't do my bedtime routine. I don't keep good hours. So it's almost like all those years that mothers spend, hopefully, helping their children develop good bedtime habits are building up a cushion so that when the now grown child, the adult child, ends up falling to back because of the bad habits they engage in as an adult, they'll have a cushion to fall back on, and they will realize, oh, I will have better, all kinds of positive things will come out of keeping that bedtime routine that my mom tried for years and years. Or in the case of our family, my dad tried to instill in me. So then we will notice that sleep is restorative, and therefore we need to have a bedtime routine. It will help us avoid those times of when we can't go to sleep just right away. We'll have to build that back up, those routines that send the sleep signals to our brains. So now I have to confess that I grew up with a different set of circumstances. My mom was a single mom, and so she was often gone at one of her 2 or 3 jobs when it was time for bedtime. And it was when I became a mom myself that I started really looking for the reasons why moms were necessary. On the days when I wasn't enjoying motherhood, because it is full of repetition and mundane chores, I wondered why my mom would say, oh, I wish I could be a mom instead of having to go to all of these jobs to put food on the table. So and that has been a critical part of me thinking through what moms bring home besides just doing chores, right? So I do think that repetition is actually really important. Moms need to be the repeaters. It's like to develop politeness, for instance, in society. It really doesn't work to just put a poster up in the cafeteria that says, be nice, don't be a bully. Those kinds of habits have to be built day in and day out with the love and guidance of a mother. I'm interested in finding a retired teacher. I'm guessing they would need to be retired for several years by now. Someone who taught during the major time of transition, perhaps the 80s and 90s, who noticed that there was a group of children, sometimes the percentage maybe was higher back earlier in this teacher's career. And they noticed that those children who were being raised in daycare had a harder time than the children whose mothers were more hands-on, more not just in person, although I think that is very high value, but also conscientious and deliberate. Now, that teacher, over the course of their 40-year career, very likely saw those changes. And I wonder what he or she would testify, just on an anecdotal level, but that's a very important place to begin. If over the years they saw that percentage change, and it became, maybe 80% of kids were being raised in a home with a full-time mother. And then over the years, it became more like only 20 to 30% were being raised by their full-time mother. And the higher percentage, the majority, were then being raised in daycare with the lack of consistency. They say that it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, but it doesn't have to be. Our children aren't dogs. We can teach them to help one another, to develop characteristics and attributes through the repetition and the example and the efforts of a mother. It's a healthy society where people sacrifice for each other. The other day, I was driving and I really needed to get in the other lane, but I had to kind of flag down the driver behind me to make sure they would let me in. There was the urgency, right, of that. It's not always the case, but in this case, I really had to get over, and that person let me get over. And of course, I waved, but then I noticed that they didn't get through the green light. By letting me cut into their space, they got stuck at the red light. And that was potentially a sacrifice. I don't know where they were headed, of course, or what kind of hurry they might have been in, but I was able to recognize that small thing. Road rage is a problem these days, right? But maybe it wouldn't be so much if we're raised in homes where over and over and over we are given verbal reminders, but also visual. We're learning by the examples of mothers to not be so individualistic, but to be interested in society as a whole. Now, a mother is more than the sum of her parts. She has an unidentifiable element that is just as indispensable as it is unidentifiable. Unfortunately, it's slowly being removed from her role as a mom. Society is normalizing a less interactive mother. She no longer has to feel much during the childbirth experience, which of course is delightful, right? I personally haven't used epidurals, but I've seen epidurals bless mothers. At the same time, that means that she doesn't feel when her child is born. If that then is coupled with things like not being able to breastfeed, and sometimes those things can be associated. If the brain is being tricked into thinking that it's not giving birth, then it might not send out the right signals to make the breast milk. So there's a lot of interesting unknowns about causal relations with that. So if a mother doesn't have to breastfeed, then she doesn't have to make those sacrifices for her infant. There's other things then too. If she's not having to be physically with her infant because she doesn't breastfeed, then she might just find it easier to not be with her infant much at all. And then the infant loses out on those bonding opportunities to really know who they can come to when they need care. I was told by my pediatrician, my oldest child, he was 4 months old, and the pediatrician said I needed to leave him alone in a room a darkened room to cry himself to sleep and not attend to his needs, not rock him to sleep, not sing lullabies to him. But that if he cried at night, then ignore him, and that would supposedly cause him to figure that out on his own at the tender age of 4 months. That was very heart-wrenching to me, and I didn't last, and that was okay with me. I committed at that point to choosing to rock, choosing to lullaby, choosing to address whatever need it was. And it wasn't always easy to tell. Was he hungry? Was his diaper wet? Was he just lonely? But I'm glad that I did. I make enough mistakes in the rest of motherhood that at least I can look back and know that I didn't make that mistake. That was when I could control doing my best to meet those needs even at night. Now, the joy of living in these times when so much of motherhood is up in the air for what it might look like, right? For generations upon generations, it came very packaged up for women. They were told what they had to do, and a lot of times they were being told by people outside of the mothering realm, and that was, of course, part of what we fought against, right? Now we have choices, and that is delightful and exciting, and it's, again, part of what we fought for. If we want to choose an epidural, how wonderful. If we want to choose not to breastfeed, that's our choice. We just have to realize that there will be consequences that come after it. I imagine if you really think really far back to the cave mom days, is what I think about. If a mother tried to let her baby cry it out, she would have been penalized somehow by the rest of the cave moms, right? They would never have accepted that she wasn't addressing her baby's needs, and it was waking up the rest of the communal families there in the caves. So choice is so important. And part of making choices is being able to look ahead at what the outcomes of those choices might be. And when we make the choice, realize that we're also choosing those outcomes. And that is wisdom right there. And we have maternal wisdom as long as people are being straightforward with us about what those outcomes are going to be. Right now, a lot of times society tries to send messages that there's no such thing as consequences, that you can do what you want and it won't really matter. And I hereby formally declare that that is wrong. Of course, things matter. Of course, there will be effects and outcomes and results and consequences. And it's only fair to be upfront with ourselves about that and choose what we choose because we see those connections. And as moms who are well educated and capable, and we know that we can run a company just as well as anyone else, we have a woman as a vice president, for heaven's sakes. We have come so far. We have shattered the glass ceiling, and yet those glass shards are coming down. What are we doing to protect the innocent bystanders, which are our children? What if we can use that power of choice that we have worked so hard for, and we can instead realize that there are times and seasons in our lives, and it's going to be different for every woman, but we can choose motherhood for a portion of that time, and so that we can meet all of those needs of our children during those intensive years. And then we could make the choice to return to the workforce and bring everything that we gained during our motherhood, which if you talk to employers, they love to employ mothers. Mothers bring phenomenal skills. They bring a measure of loyalty. They bring this can-do attitude. And so we really, when we put motherhood on a resume, we are saying that we have spent years building those skills within ourselves. And guess what? Because of the reality of mirror neurons, so this is a psychological fact, but our children are watching us. And there is built inside of their brains, for the sake of survival, something called mirror neurons. And so as we moms set these examples for our children of persistence and patience, they build that within themselves. And so they come into the workforce. I really think it would be of very great interest, but I don't know who is going to fund this kind of research project, because it does seem controversial. But wouldn't it be interesting to find out, as employers are rating their employees, those employees that are top of the pack, that have these phenomenal soft skills that are valuable to any employer, what if we tried to determine if those children, if those now adults as employees, that if as children they were raised in homes where the mother was hands-on, she was deliberate, she was intentional, and maybe she had opportunities to be in the workforce as well, but she was continued to be the main influence in her children's lives. I wonder. I do think that it makes a difference in children for quite a few reasons. One thing story that I want to tell is about a friend of mine who her oldest child was getting to be school age. And so she was really looking at all of the options, and there really are quite a few options available. She had the heart to homeschool, but just wasn't sure it was the right dynamic for her family. She looked into charter schools, which are part of where the choice in education can come, because charter schools can write their charter to focus on different things. She looked at private schools, she looked at public schools. And interestingly, the comment that she made really stuck with me, because she said, all of these schools are teaching the wrong things. Now, that was really interesting, because I figure they all kind of teach similar things, like the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. But she was wishing that she could find a school, and she did try homeschooling when she made her decision, because she felt like in her homeschool she could teach the right things that will lead to society-wide change. But she saw that she could do that more effectively, most effectively, when it was one-on-one with her child. Now, all of us, no matter how intentional and deliberate our mothers were, we can look back and see that there were holes, right, in our upbringing. That's just because no mother is perfect. And as mothers, we can take comfort in this fact, right? But we can still invest our time and our effort in our children. And that is investment in the true sense of the word, is that the payout often doesn't come until many years down the road. And this is what I think the payout might be. We are silently expressing our confidence in our children during those years that we are intensely with them. It's a confidence that they, as humans, can improve and progress. It starts when they are infants, and they babble and we talk to them anyways. When they want to crawl or walk, and we are there to cheer them on, even when they fall. We don't get upset and say, looks like you just can't do it. I guess you'll just have to stay crawling the rest of your life. But we cheer them on. And that attitude, which comes out of our excitement and desire to see them improve and progress for their own sake. Um, it it inspires them throughout their adulthood to continue on that path of self-improvement and to believe that they can get up after they fall. A mom's deliberate and dedicated and conscientious efforts cannot keep the holes from happening, the ways that we just didn't notice, or the faults and weaknesses that we have as moms might create those holes. But the loving environment that encourages progress and the nurturing that we do, even amidst our weaknesses and mistakes, builds this pattern into our children of positive growth mindset type of thinking. Now, that I think is what my friend meant when she was looking at schools and wanted them to teach the right things. And that's what I mean by a mother being more than the sum of her parts. She isn't just a chauffeur. She's not a short order cook. She's not just a laundry person. Even some of the nicer titles that we've been given, like nurse and psychologist, if she tried to just outsource all of those roles, even to professionals, they really couldn't do a whole lot better, because that child just needs their mom. And the consistency, they need to know what to expect. And if they are always with the same person, well, a great majority of the time, then they can build that up better. There will be far less anxiety, I believe, in the world when children are given that opportunity to be with the woman who loves them the most. So that is how we can rock the cradle and rock the world. Now, Momversations, which is the normal title of our show, happens every Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. If you have watched this as a recording, I invite you to come on live with us next time. You can even sign up for a text reminder on our website, which is Momivate, MOMIVATE.org. And you can click on the link that says Momversations, and it'll give you that opportunity. Sign up for a text reminder and join us live so that you can join the Momversation and ask questions and give your insights. And that is how we will truly care, connect, and collaborate.